morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Sarah Souza. I am the Assistant Director of International Admissions here at Duquesne University, and we're really excited to be talking about visa tips today. But that is one of our most popular sessions and most useful sessions. So today we are joined by Mary Beth Morris, and I'll let her introduce herself. She's going to be presenting today to you on the visa tips.
Thank you, Sarah. Yes, good morning, good afternoon, good evening for those of you all over the world. My name is Mary Beth Morris. I'm the immigration advisor here at Duquesne. And my primary role will be assisting all of you with your immigration documents, helping you to get your I-20s or your DS-2019s, depending on the visa you're applying for, and also to be your primary link once you're here on campus to help make sure you're maintaining your status and know what you need to do. So we'll give a thorough overview of how you apply for your visa, your F1 or J1 visa to get here. And at the end, we'll have a chance for any questions that you might have.
And Sienna, you want to introduce yourself? Okay. I have to unmute our colleague Sienna just a moment. Okay. All right, you should be able to unmute.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Sienna D'Alessandro, and I am the International Student Services Coordinator. And it is fantastic to be here and meeting everyone tonight.
Well, thank you so much. So we're going to get started with Mary Beth here with her presentation. I'd just like to remind all students, I'm going to be moderating the chat. So if you have questions, you're welcome to put them in the chat. Just remind you that specific questions, so questions that are just very specific to you in your situation, if you're asking about an email that you receive from us directly about your financials, that's probably not the question that you want to ask in the group chat. You are welcome to send me a direct message. I'll mark that down and we'll follow up with you. But yeah, typically in these sessions, we're looking for more general questions, and you're welcome to ask the questions in the chat as we're presenting, and I can kind of just present those questions to Mary Beth as the presentation goes on. So without further ado, I'm going to send it over to Mary Beth, and she's going to get started with her presentation.
So as Sarah indicated, this is really a useful session for everyone prior to your arrival as you begin the process of applying for either your F1 visa or J1 visa, depending, and I'll explain the difference, and what you need to do, what documents you need to gather, the appointments you need to pay, attention, making them, giving yourself ample time, and then any of the fees associated with SEVIS. So we'll go right into it and explain it as an overview, and then we'll get into a little bit more details here in a moment as well. So basically, an overview of the process. The first step would be for you to receive admission to Duquesne University. That's the first step. You qualify for admission. We grant you admission. You receive your acceptance letter. Typically, at the point of your acceptance, if you're an undergrad, you'll also receive a scholarship offer if we're able to offer you an academic scholarship. If you're a graduate student, that might come at the point of your acceptance. It might come later. So just things to keep in mind, those scholarships or assistantships, those become part of the financial assistance that we'll be talking about in a little bit, and can help towards paying for your education, which is a big part of the whole process of getting the visa, showing that you can afford to come here. After you've been accepted, you'll actually receive your information about uploading documents for an I-20. Once we've issued it, you'll have to pay the SEVIS fee. It's called the SEVIS I-901 fee. We send you information. That's basically the first step before you're even eligible to apply for a visa appointment. We'll go through this in detail, but this is just an overview. You'll likewise complete the non-immigrant online visa application. It's called the Form DS-160. Once you've gone through that, you will actually pay the visa application processing fee. So you'll notice there are two different fees here associated with SEVIS and with your visa. The SEVIS fee and the visa processing fee. Both of those fees, I also would point out, are different than your deposit with Duquesne. Your deposit with Duquesne confirms that we're holding a spot for you. We're expecting you to enroll. These other fees are important parts of the process in terms of, U.S. Homeland Security and immigration regulations. Once you've paid your visa fee, you'll schedule an interview. You'll gather all the documents you need to take with you, which we'll talk about in a moment. And then you'll attend your visa interview, which we'll also talk about. So here's an overview of what an I-20 form looks like. When you receive admission to Duquesne, we email you your documents. The things circled in red you'll see are the things you should pay attention to. At the very top, the SEVIS ID number. That's a unique number. Each student has a different one, and that pertains to your record. It locates your record, if you will, in SEVIS. The school code, which is also circled, the second one down from the top, shows the code associated with Duquesne, and that's our authorization to be able to accept international students. So sometimes you'll need that when you're filing your form application online. And of course, the third thing is their start date and your end date. These dates we approximate based on the program you've been accepted to. A typical undergraduate bachelor's degree program will have 4 years. If you're coming for English language studies, it might be maybe 3 semesters. And if you're coming for a master's degree, usually 2 years, or a doctoral degree, typically about 5 years. These dates, again, are just simply estimates. We can adjust them later if we need to, but they'll be an important thing to note as you're applying for your visa appointment. The next step is to pay the SEVIS I-901 fee. And this is a screenshot of what the website looks like. The page is listed here, the website, and this fee is a one-time fee of $350 if you're applying for the F1 visa, or $220 if you're applying for the J1 visa. And I'll just take a moment to explain the difference. If you're coming as a degree-seeking student, your intentions are to be awarded a degree here, then you would be applying for the F1 visa. If you're coming for a shorter term as an exchange student, exchange scholar, but then returning to your home institution, that's a different visa, that's a J visa. And you would not be earning a degree here at Duquesne. So just kind of a clarification. For the most part, students who are coming are coming as F1 visa holders. So again, we'll be sending you these slides so you can get these links later, but you'll need the I-20 so that you can go on to pay this. So you can't even pay the fee until we've actually issued your immigration document. The next step in the process would be to complete your non-immigrant online visa application, which is called the form DS-160. You'll enter the information exactly as it appears on the I-20 or the DS-2019 form, and the information on your passport. So when you've received your I-20 form, it is very, very important that you look over all the details in terms of your name, how it is spelled, your date of birth. Here in the United States, we do name date of birth a little backwards from most places in the world. So the month and the day are switched. So pay attention that that is in the right order. But not all information is required for the I-20. So if you notice some blanks, don't be worried about that. Places like your city of birth might not have anything entered. There's nothing to worry about. You'll pay the visa application fee to go along with this visa application. The instructions and the costs can vary from consulate to consulate and embassy to embassy, depending on what country you're in. So you'll find that out as you research where you'll be applying for your visa. That receipt that you get is very important. So make sure you retain that as proof of your payment, because you will need that later on at various steps of the process. So once you've paid these fees, submitted your visa application, you can schedule an interview. Any U.S. embassy or consulate, but usually you're going to want to do the one in your home country, or if you have residency in another country, in that country where you're living. The wait times do vary. So we are well aware, we are always paying very close attention to the turnaround time for visa appointments. Just as recently as this week, I've checked, and there are some countries that take maybe just a few days wait time to get an appointment for the F1 visa. There are others that could take 2 to 3 months or more. So we know these are always changing. We encourage you to continue to check, and sometimes you may need to check more than once a day. If people cancel an appointment, then a new appointment would become available. So the more often you check, the greater likelihood that you can get an appointment when you need it. The documents are listed here that you will need for a visa appointment. Your Form I-20 for the F1 visa or the DS-2019 for the J-1 visa. Of course, a valid passport. So check if you need to, when does it expire? Do you need to renew it? You'll need a few passport style photos. You'll need that receipt we talked about from paying your SEVIS I-901 fee. And you'll need the DS-160 confirmation page when you paid that fee and made your appointment. The visa fee might itself be a separate receipt. But then one of the most important things after all these documents we've listed are your financial documents. So whether they're bank statements, bank letters, scholarship letters from Duquesne, if you have outside scholarships, if you have funding, if you have a sponsor, all of these things we will have needed actually to review you for an I-20. And those, the answers on the I-20 to the financial questions should be supported by these same financial documents. So what you have submitted to me, to Duquesne, to be reviewed for the I-20 should be the same documents that you use when you go to your visa appointment. Also be sure to have with you your acceptance letter. All of these documents, by the way, excuse me, should be printed out. You will want paper documents. Don't have something on your phone or on a laptop that they can't access. Print everything out, maybe have 2 sets of copies. I encourage you to have all of your academic documents. So test scores, transcripts. If you're going for a master's degree, have your bachelor's degree transcripts. If you're coming for a bachelor's degree, have your high school transcripts and grades. And one of the biggest things, we'll talk about this again, is any documents that you can provide that show ties to your home country. This visa, the F1 or the J1, is very specific here in the United States. It is considered a non-immigrant visa. So you are not able to easily change from a student visa or an exchange student visa to become a permanent resident. These years that you would spend studying do not count towards residency. So by applying for an F1 or a J1 visa, you're basically telling our US government that you have no intention of staying in the US. This is a temporary visa, merely for the period of time to earn your education. So after your education is over, you have every plan to return to your home country. And that's what this last bullet point means, documents showing ties to your home country. So if you have a family business, maybe you're earning a degree to come back home and to work for the family business, having documents showing that, having a job offer letter, whether it's that same family business or another job. If you're maybe working in a job but leaving for a few years to get a degree, a letter from that employer saying that you have the job when you return. Things like property, if you own property, bank accounts, that sort of thing. So start to think about that as we go through these lists, because those will be very, very critical. I think one of the #1 reasons for visa denials is that students are unable to prove their intent to return home, that they have not proved that they will not be trying to immigrate to the US. So because this is a non-immigrant visa, that's one of the very most important things, is that you're showing your intent is only to be transient, to be a short-term student, and then to return back home. When you go for your visa interview, you'll see from these photos, it could be a very crowded and very kind of busy day and experience. There are often long lines. This is an indication of a line outside of the consulate. These are people that haven't even gotten inside yet, but they all have appointments. Many times, the appointment will be very brief. So the consular officer will be meeting with you. You'll see that in the bottom photo. It will not be a sit-down interview. It will most likely be standing. You'll be at a window with glass in between you and the consular officer. And that consular officer will be reviewing your documents to determine whether you qualify to receive the F1 or the J1 visa. Typically, the interviews last 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes at most. They're very short. It will most often be conducted in English. So unless you're coming to study English language studies, you do have to show proficiency in English because, of course, your courses here, your programs here will all be taught in English. So this is an excellent thing to actually practice before you go. You could sit down with a family member or a friend and have them ask you questions, just general questions, which we'll go through in a moment, and have your answers prepared. Practice saying them in English. And so as the officer asks you questions, you will answer, you will produce the supporting documents. Typical topics that will be part of this interview, things like your study plans, your choice of Duquesne, what is your academic capability, a lot about finances, what are your plans post-graduation, after you graduate, a little bit more about your family and background, and just some general questions. So we'll go through each of these one by one because they can get a little in depth. So study plans. What is your major? Know how your major appears on your I-20 document. Not always does the Duquesne major name exactly match how SEVIS describes it. So there might be just a little bit of disparity between what you think your major is and how we document it in SEVIS. And we're kind of held to what SEVIS requires as a school. We submit all of our majors to SEVIS and then they assign the code. So take a look at that. They're going to definitely want to understand more about your program and to determine what you know about your program. So not only what is your major, how long is your degree program? Those dates are right there on the I-20. Again, a bachelor's degree is typically 4 years, a master's degree is typically 2 years, and a doctoral program could take anywhere from 5 to 7 years. They may ask, what do you already know about your field of study? Perhaps you've been working in the field and you realize you need or want a higher degree to advance in that field. Maybe it's a new field. Maybe you're changing your area of study. So know that you can answer these questions, that you feel confident. That will also be important during the interview is how do you come across? Do you seem genuine? Do you know these answers? So really practicing is very important. The question is obvious again, why are you planning to continue your education? Be able to answer that as it pertains to you, obviously very truthfully, but with conviction. There's something that must be very compelling for you to want to leave your home country, spend this money, travel this great distance to arrive in the United States for study. So be able to speak to that, what's bringing you to Duquesne. And then how will this study program relate to your past work or your previous studies? So again, it may not, but it most likely does. So kind of formulate all of those things and really, kind of jot down some answers and then again, start to practice them. When it comes to questions in the interview, they will likely ask you about your choice of schools. Why Duquesne University? You've heard me say it several times, but I wrote it here on the screen. It's pronounced Duquesne. It's a French word, but it's very, very challenging even for Americans to be able to say it correctly. So Duquesne University. They may ask, how many universities have you applied to? If you applied to 5 and you were accepted to 1 and it was Duquesne, that's why you probably want to come to Duquesne, but there might be other reasons. To how many universities were you admitted? How many universities may have rejected your application? This next question, do you know your professors at Duquesne? What are their names? That is a very unlikely question that you could answer. You haven't been here yet. But if you're applying to a graduate program, very often the chairman of the department or the chairwoman of the department will be the one that signs your acceptance letter. So look carefully at that. And you might be able to find a name there. And then another question is, where is Duquesne located? In what city and in what state? So if you do not know, we are located in the city of Pittsburgh. and we're in Western Pennsylvania. So the state is Pennsylvania. You can look us up on a map. Another question might be about your academic capability. Asking what are your test scores? Have you taken the GRE, the GMAT, the TOEFL, the IELTS? And depending on your program, you may have or you may not have been required to take those. So be familiar with them, with your scores, have your scores printed out, have them handy. If those were used as part of your admission, those will be very important. They may ask the question, what was your previous GPA in high school or previous university? Obviously, we have a GPA requirement for admission. So everything, will be reflected in your transcripts from previous schools. And that will be a big part of what was able to allow us to offer you admission. They may ask, what do you know about US schools in general? How will you manage the cultural and educational differences in the US? And is that even something that you've thought of yet? As you can see, there are a lot of really in-depth questions to consider and to review for yourself before you even go on for the visa interview. They may ask to see a diploma, whether it be from high school or previous college work. Have that available. They may ask you, how good is your English? Do you feel prepared to study in the United States in English? We find that many of our applicants are well-versed in English, have studied it maybe most of their lives. For many of you, it's your second language, but just as common to you as your first language. So, be able to speak to that. I think that's going to show your readiness for an education in English. A big part of this, so we'll kind of go through these one by one, is the whole area of the financial status. This big red circle here on our sample I-20 shows you that section of your I-20 where financials are listed. So we'll go through the bullet points and then I'll talk a little bit too about specifics within this section. So they may ask, who is going to sponsor your education? So if you are paying for it yourself, then you are your sponsor. A lot of times we see families, parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles contributing towards the cost of the education. Those should also be listed, as part of the financial documents that you have submitted to us for review. We therefore put them on the I-20. So if you have a sponsor, what is that sponsor's occupation? Do you know their monthly or their annual income? That becomes important when we look at the cost of the education here at Duquesne. We need to know that you're able to afford it. Those are the two main things when we issue an I-20, is that one, you're academically accepted, so you've proven that you're admissible. And second is that you're financially able to pay for your education. So those are really the two things that come down to an I-20. So this financial part becomes very important. How do you plan to fund the entire duration of your education? Knowing how long your program will last, knowing how many years you have to fund becomes very critical and very important. They may ask you, what is the cost of a Duquesne education? And again, if you look inside the red circle, you'll see that we break it down by several areas. We put tuition and fees. So in this example, it shows $23,000. Living expenses here, it shows $6,000. Typically, we estimate living expenses to be almost $15,000 for 1 year. That's regardless of your major, grad, undergrad, ESL, or regardless of where you plan to live. That's just a cost of living estimate for 8 to 12 months of living in the US, having housing and being able to feed yourself. If you were to bring any dependents with you, that's an additional cost. In this example, there's one dependent and there's an additional $3,000 listed. And then other is the last line item. In this example, there isn't anything listed, but most of our programs have about an additional $5,000 or so under other. And those things include maybe the cost of your books, international health insurance, which is required, and things like that. So we add all of those things together, the tuition and fees, the living expenses, any dependent expenses, and those other costs to get your bottom line. And then that is the amount of funding you'll have to show when we issue the I-20. So knowing how much the university costs, the cost of an education in the US, private education is expensive. Whether it's something you're used to in your home country, many countries, if you're accepted to university, it might be that you're also offered a great deal of funding that you're not paying much for the rest of your costs. But here in the United States, the cost of an education is the burden of the student. So being able to know what the costs are, and again, how you plan to pay for it is very, very critical. Were you offered a scholarship? That's why those letters are going to be important. You should probably know the exchange rate. What is the exchange rate between your currency and the US dollar? And that's something that also will come into play if the markets are stable or volatile, how much your money translates into US dollar. They may ask if you have a copy of your bank statement. So if you're funding yourself, absolutely, you'll want to have that. They may ask to see about any tax returns. How is your country taxing? Is that something that it reflects your total income? So depending on your country, you may or may not have something like that to show, but it might be something good to kind of be prepared for, at least bring what you can. When it comes to the interview questions for your plans after graduation, what do you plan to do? Do you plan to work? There'll be some opportunities for work in the US as part of your F1 or J1 visa. And so you could stay for a little bit, get some great experience in the US with your degree, but ultimately remember your plans would be to go back home. You could have plans for additional studies if you're just getting a bachelor's or master's. That's a great option. Yes, I want to go on for my PhD. I don't know where I'll do it. Maybe in the United States, maybe in my home country, maybe in another country. Questions like, do you have a job or career in mind after you graduate? What do you plan to do with this degree? And of course, the big question, do you plan on returning back to your home country? And that answer is yes. Yes, you do. This non-immigrant F1 or J1 visa does not entitle you to be able to stay in the US. So you want to make it clear that you have plans to return back home. Again, do you have a job offer there? That's going to be a very big support to showing your ties to your home country. And how might you use the skills and the knowledge that you gained in your degree program? That's going to tie very closely to what's drawn you to this field of study. So those should be questions you're comfortable answering. There may be questions about your family and your background. If your parents are some of your sponsors, what do your parents do? Where do they live? How many siblings do you have? Do you have any relatives in the US? Now, that last question is a big one that they will often ask. They want to see if you have ties here in the United States. Now, as always, with all of these questions, you really would answer honestly and truthfully. So if you have relatives in the US, yes, you can say, I have a cousin who's also a student. He's studying, in California, or whatever it might be. So be able to speak to those other relatives, why they're in the US, maybe where they are and what they're doing here. Again, be forthright, be honest in your answers. And then just some of the general questions. Why do you want to study in the US? Why not another country, English speaking, such as the United Kingdom, Great Britain or Australia? Why not stay in your own home country and study? And those questions could be easily answered, that you maybe don't have the opportunity for the same degree in the same field of study. So, really think through those questions and answers. If you're currently working, why are you leaving your current job? That can be a big one. You have a career, you have a job, why leave that to go on and study? Now, this next question is bolded for a reason. Do you plan to work in the US? And that's a tricky question. Under your F1 or J1 visa, you are permitted to do certain types of work, but it's very specific and very limited, and it might not be something that can start right away. So my suggestion for you to answer, how do you plan to work in the US, should be no, you don't really plan to work, because of course your goal is to study. There might be options for you to work eventually. Again, the directly in your field of study is what's so key. So if you were to try to answer that you plan to work to support your education, that will be a red flag. That will not go over well and probably lead to a visa denial. Because again, you've already shown that you have proof of funding. So you should not need to work to support your education. So be careful and pay attention to these very, very specific questions. They may say, what will you do if your visa is denied? So you could try again. You may choose to attend a different school in a different country. You may choose to stay home. So have thought through these answers so that you can be prepared to provide them. They will often ask, have you been to the US before? Most likely they already know the answer to that question because they've got your passport information and they could look up any immigration records. If you have been to the US, you may say, yes, I loved it. That's what led me to want to come and study. If you have not, say no, but I hear so many good things. This is why I want to come. So, really think through these. And a big question, will you return to your home country during vacation periods? I can honestly say we see a little bit of everything. We see some students who come from such far distances that it's very challenging to be able to get home that often. It's also a big expense. So that answer to this question will be different for each one of you. Your goal may be, yes, I would like to come home, but I know I won't be able to go home maybe more than once a year. Or I may not go home at all during my studies. I may go to the US and just stay there. But think through it because part of your answer will determine the funding. If you are going to travel far distances, often that again is a lot of money. So they want you to think through and really have an insight as to how you plan, your course of action with coming to the US to study. So this is an image of what a visa might look like. A visa approval. So you will know at the end of the interview before you leave if your visa has been granted or if you have been denied. If you've either way, we ask you to keep us informed. If you've been denied, you can ask for the reason. It's typically one of the things we listed that you don't show maybe that your financial support is solid enough or maybe ties to your home country. But you are allowed to apply again for another visa. If you do get your visa granted, they will often keep your passport to issue the visa, and you'll come back later to pick it up a couple days or so. And this visa sticker will be placed inside your passport. So if you do get your visa approved, continue to plan with all your pre-departure, remain in contact with us here at Duquesne, make your plans to arrive in the US with your visa and your I-20. You can arrive no earlier than 30 days before your start date. So if you're coming for the fall 2023 semester, you can arrive as early as July 11th. That's 1 month before our international orientation begins on August 10th. And if you're a student looking to come for spring of 2024, you could arrive as early as the 10th of December of this year. And our orientation would be on the 9th of January of 2024. So they allow a 30-day window to arrive. It allows you to get over jet lag, to get settled if you need to find a place to live. But keep in mind with all those things. If you're denied the visa, try to find out why it was denied. As I indicated, it would be in writing. You can review your options to apply again, but certainly don't panic. Apply again as soon as possible, bring additional documentation, and emphasize ties to your home country, as I've said all along. General tips: complete all steps of the process as soon as possible. Practice your interview in English. Be able to explain the purpose of your F1 and J1 visa and how your plans fit with that visa type. Wear proper clothing. Be respectful. Show your seriousness with your intentions. Always be honest, confident, polite, but brief. Answer only the question they're asking. And be familiar with all your documents. Remember what the consular officer is looking for. Emphasize that you have no plans to immigrate to the US, that you have strong ties to your home country, family, property, investments, and career prospects. COVID, we don't really need to address it. We're back in full swing. We're having classes in person. We've returned since the fall of 2021. But if there's COVID limitations in your home country, certainly let us know. That may affect your visa application process. And we have some links to some videos that we found online that could be very useful. Again, you'll get this when you get the slides. But basically, that's our overview. Sarah, I'll ask you what you want to do next.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mary Beth. I think you were very thorough, so the students have no questions, so we'll end it here today. Students, please, as always, if you have questions, you can send them to Intel Admissions, and we'll be happy to answer them. So thank you for joining today. It was very informative. Thanks again to Mary Beth, and we look forward to hearing from you. Take care.
Bye, thanks.